Hi, the purpose of this recording is to review the scoring rubric for your grant that you will be submitting in a couple weeks. This is the scoring rubric that you should find in Blackboard, and what you should see right here, this is part 1. And in part 1, you're going to be writing your background, needs assessment, and community analysis. And part 1 is broken into several different sections. People often find it helpful to divide them by the subheadings. So the first subheading you might have is part 1A, background and needs assessment. It's helpful if you have that subheading, part 1A, background and needs assessment. As we discussed, this is a combination of your needs assessment and your community analysis combined. You're to take your problem and use the data you found for your needs assessment and talk about the problem and the population at a national level. You should be utilizing national data with citations, and you're going to be moving from then a national level to your local data for your population. So again, you're taking your needs assessment with the national data, and you're then combining it with the community analysis, which is the local population and local data. That is a combination of the first two papers you wrote for this class. You then go down to this section, and you see it says populations well defined and appropriate and diverse complete data sources are used. You have a clear need. This is not something you will write, but it is something that I will grade. When I grade the first section, background and needs assessment, am I going to see that your population is well defined? If it is, you get a 2. Am I going to see that you have cited a variety of data sources that are very good at showing you have a need for your grant? If you do that, if you've used a variety of sources and they clearly show a need for your population, then you get those points. This is not something you actually write. The next section right here is talking about a community analysis. Before you get to this section, you will have talked about secondary data that you found on your population and the problem. When you get to this section, you should be moving into the primary data collection processes. So what are you going to do in your primary data collection to further collect data showing that your group is in need? And if you look back at some of the early lectures that we had, there's one specifically on how to collect primary data, and it was the lecture that included things like focus groups and surveys, community meetings. So that's what you'll be discussing. You will be discussing what will be done by your program staff to further collect data. You will also see that it says patch model right here. You will not say, I am using the patch model and this is what I'm doing. When you describe the way you are collecting your primary data, if it is done correctly, you will hit the parts of the patch model. So make sure you look at your community analysis paper and make sure you take a lot of attention on the strategies that you said you were going to use for primary data collection. If something needs to be tweaked, then you need to tweak it. And the last part of this section is something called your logic model. This was a homework assignment that we did, and in the homework assignment, we did not complete everything. We completed the top 3 items on the top of the page, and we completed the 4th column all the way to the right. When you submit your logic model with your grant, it needs to be complete. And so you would have to fix anything that was wrong with the one you submitted, and then you would have to fill in the first 3 columns in the chart. And so that has to be complete in order to get all the points. Your logic model should actually address all the risk factors that you talk about prior to this point in your paper. So I will be looking to see if your logic model actually addresses what you say the needs are for your population. So that's part 1A. Again, it's a compiling your papers, your needs assessment and community analysis, and your logic model, making sure they all align with each other and the grant. And if you look up here, it's worth 50 points. That is a lot of points. So this should require a lot of your attention. Then you have section 1B, and again, people find it helpful to actually put in their paper part 1B, statement of purpose. For this section, you will be copying and pasting the exact goals or purpose statements for your grant. And you've done that several times in your papers, so by this point, you should know exactly what the goals or purpose is of your grant. If you have done that correctly, you get all 5 points. If you did not do it correctly and you have the wrong information, then you don't get the points. The next part of your paper will be called Part 1C, and this is a work plan or implementation plan. Again, people find it helpful to say Part 1C, work plan or implementation plan. This section is a combination of your 3rd and 4th papers. This is a combination of your theory and rationale paper and your implementation and evaluation paper. So that's what happens in this section. The first thing you see is that you should be identifying at least one model that supports the programming. You did this in your theory and rationale paper, and now you're going to look at that paper and tweak it and make sure you fix what was wrong. You then have, what I'm going to look at is the way you describe your model or models that you're using. Do they clearly support your program? So based on what your needs assessment and your community analysis say above, does this model show that you understand it and that it supports your program? The next thing you have is not a narrative or an essay, but it is the 3-column chart that you just submitted in your implementation and evaluation paper that will have the goal of the grant at the top. Under the goal of the grant, you will have your community goal. Then you will have the 3-column chart with objectives, strategies, assessments, and evaluation. The first column is objectives, the second column is strategies, and the third column is assessments. So right here, you're getting marked. Do you have the goals and do you have the correct 3-column chart? That's worth 3 points. I'm going to then give you up to 10 points to determine whether all or almost all of your objectives are SMART. So make sure when you're looking over your theory and rationale paper and your implementation paper that you have addressed any issues that you had with your objectives. The next item that will be graded is I'm going to read your entire chart and I'm going to decide, do the 3 columns align with each other? So do the objectives match the assessment, and will the strategies get you to your successful completion of your objectives? Most people who lose points here lose them because things are not clear enough. Oftentimes strategies, the middle column is not clear enough to explain what you're doing so that I understand how everything connects. Then I look at that same 3-column chart to see if they align with your grant. So any feedback you've gotten, does your grant goal and your community goal match? And does your chart match with the community or grant goal? Those are things that I look at. Have you addressed the issues that I've identified prior to this point in time? You then will give a brief narrative, and by brief, I mean 1 to 3 paragraphs, probably 3 paragraphs, that give an overview of explaining the major components of your program. You might want to call this part of your paper, you might want a subheading that says Program Components. And what you should do is describe your program in narrative. So you are taking the chart that I just looked at that might be 5 or 10 pages long and putting it into 3 paragraphs. And sometimes people find it easiest to say in Goal 1, the grant wants the community to do this. And the way this program will address that goal is to do the following items and then talk about a few things that you're doing in your grant, in your program. Then you might say another thing they want us to do, another thing that's supposed to happen is that we're supposed to do in goal 2 these items. And the way this program is going to address that is through these program issues. So sometimes it's easy to discuss your program if you address each one of the goals that's been identified for your grant. Then what I'm looking for is I'm looking for the work plan that you turned in with your implementation and evaluation paper. So the work plan chart is that chart that says what needs to be done, by whom and by when. And then the third column is empty because if this were an actual grant, you would then use that to fill in as you're working on your grant. You need to make sure that this work plan or work chart shows me 3 years worth of work because your grant for this class is 3 years long. The next item I look at is the Excel spreadsheet timeline, which says the exact same thing as your work plan, but in a different format. And one of the things that I look for, and is the main thing I look for, is does the Excel spreadsheet match your timeline? If they match, you typically get all 5 points in this section. If they don't match, then you lose points. So this one has to show me 3 years worth of detailed items. This one needs to be the exact same information as this one. So that concludes Part 1C. Part 1D is called Evaluation. And so what you're going to do in this section is in your implementation and evaluation paper, you were supposed to describe your evaluation. And so what you would do is take the third column of your chart from your third column of this chart, and you'll now put it in a narrative explaining what's going to happen. This should be no more than 3 or 4 paragraphs long, and you should be discussing how you're going to evaluate the program. The evaluation is based on the third column. Again, sometimes people find it easy to explain. Goal 1 says X, and the way that goal will be evaluated is by using the following items, and each item will evaluate whatever. People often find that the easiest way to do it. This is something, the next item right here, which is worth 10 points, is something we have not done in class that I want you to finish thinking through all the way to the end, your evaluation. So if you say in this section in your evaluation narrative that you're going to track attendance at meetings, then one of your samples of an evaluation tool would be in a meeting sign-in. If you say one of your evaluation tools will be a survey asking certain information, then one of the samples of your evaluation tools here that you submit could be some questions from that survey. What's very important for this section to get all the points is you need to list the objectives that this tool is measuring. So if, for example, one of your objectives were that 75% of the community will attend at least 80% of the meetings by the end of the first year, you would list that objective and then show the sign-up sheet. And so it's important that you have the objective with the evaluation tool so that I can see if your tool is doing what it says it's going to do. Typically, if you do what I just said, you get all 10 points. The way people lose points is when they don't have the objective with the sample and I don't know if it matches anything and I can't figure it out, or if you just don't do it at all. And 10 points is a lot of points to lose just because you did not do something. Again, you haven't done this before. This is something new you're going to have to do. Right here, the evaluation tools and measurements, all I'm doing is looking at the items you've submitted here to make sure that they measure what they're supposed to. So that is the end of part 1. Next, you have part 2. Part 2 shows the capacity of your ability to do this program. And by your ability, I mean whichever organization is that you're representing. So if you're the county government health department, or you're the state health department, or you're the American Lung Association, or the NAACP, whatever organization you are, you're proving that you can do this program in this section. Again, this is a section that we have not done in class. This will be the first time you're doing this for most of it. The first item will be 1 or 2 paragraphs describing the staffing that you need for your program. You did this in the very beginning of the semester, and I gave you comments, and now you've had the whole semester to look at it, and now you will be fine-tuning it and describing the staffing. It might say this program needs 3 social workers, a part-time psychotherapist, contractual services through a drug testing company, and rental space for meetings. That's just 1 to 2 paragraphs. Then here, you're going to explain how your organization has a strong relationship with population. So, for example, if you were a group of community churches, you might say in this section that the community churches, and give the churches by name from your specific community, that your organization has developed a relationship with them, and your organization has run the following programs with the churches in the community. I am looking for something that makes sense. You're making this up because you don't have any relationships in the community, because this is a grant that you're writing that you're not already living in that community or working in that community. So you need to find organizations in your community that would help you implement your program the way it is designed. That could be other organizations, it could be churches, it could be politicians, it could be schools, but you have to figure that out. What is that? Who are the people? You need to explain that, or how the organizations work. When you explain, and I skipped one, I'll go back to it. When you explain the relationships that you have with other agencies and other programs that you've run for your population with these agencies, what you're doing is you're showing a strong ability, a strong relationship with the organizations and the community, and you are showing your capacity to actually run this program. Remember, you might be asking for $250,000. They want to read that you can actually do this program. And then that leads us to this right here, and this is usually the last piece that people put in this section, 2A, and that is a list of people who are on your advisory board. So at this point, you need to be thinking about, in your community, which organizations and which people in the community should be on a board that advises you on decision making. So if you had 3 options on how you were going to deliver a program, the advisory board would meet, and you would give them the 3 options, and you would get their feedback on which one would be the best and why. And so you need to, for this, list specific organizations and titles. So you might write the director of nursing at Mercy Hospital, the director of community outreach at Good Samaritan Hospital. You might write the chief executive officer of a community organization. You might name some people from the community. What you would do for that is you would say 2 parents from public school 492, whatever it is. But this is a list of people that should represent your community, represent the problem, and these should be people who can give you guidance on what to do and who also can help you implement your program. So that's part 2A. Part 2B are Excel spreadsheets, and these spreadsheets are your budget and budget narrative, and you will, whatever feedback you got from me on the budget and budget narrative, you need to fix it. When I grade your budget the first time, it is not attached to a program, so I'm just giving you feedback on what you have. When I look at your budget now, I'm going to be looking to see, does this budget match what you say you're going to do? So that you need to make sure you fix any errors. Then the purpose of appendices, and we can talk about these at another point. Sometimes you have too many pages for what you're allowed to have, and you then have to have appendices. So say, for example, you are allowed to have 30 pages single-spaced in your grant, and you have 33 pages. then you're going to want to take out some items and make them appendices. An easy item that people use as an appendix is an advisory board. It could be data charts. It could be your work plan that shows what needs to be done by whom and by when. That's a very easy thing to make an appendix. So if you go over the page limits, the way to get around that is to have appendices. And if you need guidance with that, you can talk to me about that. So here is the last section for your grading. The first one is correct formatting, and that means that you have to use what the grant says. Most of the grants are single-space 12-point font, and the 3 fonts that can be used is New Roman Times, Calibri, and Arial. Those are the 3 that from which you can choose. If your grant does not tell you the font you can use, those are the 3 you can use. It has to be 12-point font. It has to have 1-inch margins at the top, bottom, left, and right. If it doesn't have that, then it's converted to that font and those margins, and anything that goes over the page limit is not graded. You need to have a title page and a reference list, and those, each one's worth 1 point. You need to make sure that your title page is APA format, and you need to make sure your reference list is correct. Then the spelling and grammar errors. You can see that if you have 5 to 9, you can get 5 to 9 points if you have 2 to 6 spelling and grammar errors. And I usually do not count the first 2. So once we get over 2 spelling or grammar errors, then you start losing points for this. You have had extensive feedback on spelling and grammar errors on your papers. I expect you to fix those. If you don't fix those, then you just lose points very rapidly. Then we have APA errors, and the items that I'm looking for in APA. Do you have a title page in the correct format? Are your pages numbered throughout your paper correctly? Are you citing APA correctly in text citations? And is your reference list correct in APA format? Again, I usually give you 1 or 2 errors with no point deductions, but otherwise you just start losing points quickly if you don't have APA correctly demonstrated, because we spent a lot of time during the entire semester on writing papers giving feedback on that. So this is the work plan sheet you should be using for the 3 goals, and most of you have already used the correct one, so this is fine. If you have any questions after reading over this document and listening to this presentation, do not hesitate to organize your questions so that they can be answered the next time we talk. Thanks for watching this presentation, and good luck with writing your grants.